Hey there! We just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who have listened, shared, engaged, and sent us love. It means the world to know that we've had the chance to spread even just a little bit of knowledge, insight, and encouragement to you along your health journeys.
If you'd like to support the work we're doing, we've created a Patreon page where you can earn some exciting rewards, because being a part of the HIP team isn't just a hobby, it's a lifestyle.
Contributions start as low as $1 a month, with each level offering a number of super fun perks, like monthly bonus episodes, Q&As, a portrait drawn by our own in-house artist, and even personal chats with the Health It's Personal team.
We created this podcast so that everyone can have the chance to access informative, inspirational, and insightful stories. And your support is a huge step in us reaching those who need it most. We wish we could give you all a big hug, but hopefully this will suffice, at least until we're allowed to hug again.
If you love what you hear or are as passionate about health as we are, please visit patreon.com/thehip podcast. That's patreon.com/thehip podcast. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you again, and thanks in advance for joining our ever-growing HIP family.
Hello everyone and welcome to Health It's Personal. Today we couldn't be more thrilled to kick off the first week of our parenting series. As we are all about starting tough conversations around here, no one is more fitting to start this health and parenting journey than clinical psychologist Dr. Becky Kennedy. She's the master of how to start tough conversations and resolve conflict with curiosity and empathy, and gives us brilliant phrases and conversation starters that will help us strengthen relationships with our children as well as our partners and with anyone really.
Absolutely, yeah. It was really helpful for parents and kids of all ages, both ways, right? It's helping the kids talk to their parents and helping the parents talk to their kids. But like you said, it also helps to strengthen all of our relationships in our lives, especially as kids become teens, become adults. And it was really helpful for us to listen to as well, even for having a relationship with our own selves.
Yeah, this episode was a game changer for me. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it several times and really work at practicing the different conversations that she shared with us.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed how kind of the hallmark of having a strong relationship with your kids is being a sturdy leader. And she offers a lot of creative opportunities to remind your children that you are a sturdy leader. And she uses the metaphor of flying a plane and being the pilot of the plane, and how you have to make everyone in the cabin feel comfortable and like you're the leader and like you're in charge, even if you don't have all the right answers.
Yeah, she definitely said that sturdiness is separate from your ability to have all the answers.
No, yeah, I love that part because you think of leadership or parenting and you think, I have to know all the things, right? I have to know everything. I have to know all the answers. But I think being a sturdy leader also involves admitting when you don't.
Yeah, that vulnerability. It helps show that you're a person and that there's strength in being confident about the fact that you know you don't have all the answers, but you're still doing your best. I think that's showing confidence, and it makes the people looking to you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and it's okay to say, this is the strongest voice inside me right now. This is where I feel like we need to go right now, and I might be wrong, but I'm the person that needs to make these choices. Yeah.
I loved kind of how it's always good to listen and to be empathetic and to understand, even if you don't agree. And it really reminds me, again, of that pilot analogy and how, the pilot can talk to the crew, can talk to the passengers and listen to them, but they're not going to necessarily let those decisions or those comments impact them. They're going to listen to it, but they're not going to, also freak out.
Can you imagine if people on the plane were like, I know how to land this plane, let me do it. And the pilot was just like, okay.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's cool because like a fun airplane fact is when the pilots are below 10,000 feet, they're not allowed to talk to anyone in the airplane. They're only allowed to talk to the tower control, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. So Sean knows all this stuff. I forgot. Sean and Jim fly all over the place.
But it's really cool because that reminds me of kind of what we talked about today. Again, to take it a step further and just think about, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to understand what you're saying. But right now, in this moment, this is a time where I can't, right? We're going to make these decisions, get us down to the ground safely. Then we'll figure it out again. We'll revisit, once the time allows. Once it's safe, then we can talk again.
Do you try to talk to Jim during that time, Sean?
Absolutely not. I mean, yes, I do,
love
but
it.
I'm not supposed to. So
I love that she says the key to parenting and marriage is to ask more questions and that nothing is really ever solved with logic
Yeah.
or by using logic, and making those connections and relationships. This episode really speaks for itself. There's so much amazing wisdom, so much practical wisdom. She not only explains why we do the things that we do, but also the how of it, like how to actually take these difficult topics and turn them into really productive conversations.
Something that's stood the test of time is teenagers feeling like their parents don't understand them. It's been a while since they were teenagers, and times change so quickly. Just letting both sides know when you want to bring up a tricky conversation or when you do something that tests your relationship, that I hear you and I feel you and I know why you want to sneak out at night. Like, I get it. We've all been there. And so let's talk about that. Like, let's dive into that. Let's understand how you're feeling. And then maybe I can tell you how it scares me when you do those things, like, let's get into it without just saying, here's on the surface why that's not a good idea.
Logic.
Yeah, the logic, but really saying, like, I totally get why you want to sneak out and see your friends. Like, that sounds way more fun than like staying in here and studying, but no judgment zone.
I think parents sometimes feel like their job is to teach all of these lessons before their kids go out into the real world. And it's easy to get caught up in that and totally focus on those teachings rather than focus on the connection that's created through all the other parts of being a parent.
And on that note of kind of understanding, I think what my takeaway from all of that is if you don't feel like you understand your teen, or if you feel like as a teen or a child of any age that your parents don't understand you, I think that it's okay to even acknowledge that they might not, and they might not ever understand you. And that's actually okay. Like, my biggest takeaway was don't pretend or don't even force yourself to understand, but at least try your best to listen and empathize. Like she said in our conversation, which is absolutely wonderful, something along the lines of, I don't understand that decision, but let's kind of, like McKenna, like you said, like let's talk about why you might have made that decision, and let's get to the root of it, right? Let's figure out for you, what's your truth? How do you understand yourself? And then tell me about that.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Becky has a lot of experience as a clinician, but she also has 3 kids of her own, and she has a lot of practice with these conversations, but she also loves to have fun. And I think during this time right now, it's really important for us to have some good fun and being silly and connecting on a completely different level so that when the tough times do come up, it's easy to remember how we felt during those fun times.
Something she said too was it's important to be a sturdy leader for your kids, but you got to be a sturdy leader for yourself, and you got to fill your own cup.
I was just thinking about the airplane analogy for ourselves. So say we're the pilot of our own lives, which we are, and there are people in your life that they think they're in first class and they're acting like they have control over the things that you're doing, or there are people in the way back screaming or freaking out as you're making choices for yourself. We have to remember that we're in charge.
Yeah. Some Aaron Sorkin, who made West Wing and everything. And he has a lot of great shows. And Jim's been sharing Studio 60, which is like a little bit more of a serious 30 Rock. And but it's the same type of show, but with Aaron Sorkin's style. Sarah Paulson's character is a Christian, and she said that her mom told her, if anyone says Jesus is their co-pilot, they should ask to switch seats. Because we are the pilots of our own lives, but maybe sometimes we're not making the best decisions for ourselves, I guess. But I love that.
That's so funny. That's great.
But we are in charge of our own airplanes.
Or a hot air balloon, or
the thing that Leonardo da Vinci decided. The ornithopter.
Ornithopter.
Anyways.
That's so funny. Yeah, Yeah, so we hope that this episode will act as a tool and a guide for you to start your own conversations. So please, everyone, grab a cup of tea and enjoy this conversation with Dr. Becky.
Health is understanding what you need,
being informed, finding that balance of mental and physical,
building yourself a support system,
figuring things out on my own and not letting it hold me back.
You do kind of have to advocate for yourself.
Because health, it's personal.
Good morning, Dr. Becky. During our parenting series, we're talking with experts about all kinds of topics that parents find challenging to understand or talk with openly with their teens or young adults. You've been pouring into parenting communities for some time, sharing practical wisdom and modeling tough conversations between parents and kids. Would you mind telling us a bit about your background and what led you to this work?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Becky Kennedy, and I'm a clinical psychologist. And I went to Columbia for my PhD in adult and child psychology. So when I was there, I worked with kids and adults and loved kind of the variety of training and experience. And where it led me to eventually, after years of working in a hospital setting, was starting my own private practice where I actually work only with some adolescents and all adults, even though many of those adults have younger children. So a lot of my work involves talking to adults about what's happening in their family system, though I no longer work with the youngest kids myself.
So you kind of have that experience knowing what's going on in the minds of both young people and adults. And so it's easy for you to kind of make those connections.
Yeah, you're saying connections makes me think about where I think so much of the power of my parenting work actually comes from a combination of, yes, having initially worked with kids, having 3 young kids myself, and I see really how different children are from each other. And also so much of my work with adults involves reflecting and thinking about what life experiences have I been through, how is my body wired to make me the way I am today, and how are the things I'm doing as an adult that are no longer adaptive, how were they adaptive growing up? Because we only do things that were adaptive. We're evolutionary animals, right? So and then that inspires so much actually of my parenting work, ironically enough, the adult therapy I do, because it makes me think, oh, well, if we know these patterns of kind of family patterns that ended up not working for people by the time they're adults, what if we kind of got ahead of that and help parents today with young children not do those things and do things that these adults totally needed but never got, and then we can actually wire our kids totally differently for the next generation.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
brilliant.
cool.
Really complicated though, because parents have all this baggage that you have to sort of weed through in order to get them to behave in the way that they need to do the right thing for their own kids, which is so hard, right?
It is. And I think one of the things that brought me to this field is I truly am just endlessly fascinated by humans and by systems. So in family systems, I'm fascinating. I've worked in organizations to help, when you're talking about a boss and his employees or her employees, that's also just a system, and the roles people take on and why we kind of react to people the way we do. I find I'm so curious. And so I think one of the things people say to me sometimes is, "Oh, you're so not judgmental of parents." And to that I would say thank you, but I think it's just the opposite. I'm just very curious, and I actually think that's key to parenting is or actually to marriage, to work, to anything, is when we're curious about people. It's kind of the opposite of being judgmental. You ask more questions and you add statements or judgments, and you end up learning a lot. And there's never been an adult ever that I've worked with, even when they share some awful behavior they've done, that I haven't still been able to hold as kind of like a good person who's just kind of stuck in a pattern that even they don't want to be in, but obviously must have worked for them at some point in their lives, and who, when they're in a more regulated place, wants to do better. And I think that's totally true of parents of young kids, that they want to do better than what was done for them, and they need just a whole host of tools to be able to make that shift.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, I think the key to the brilliance that is what you share is that you're able to model it. And sometimes, even though we know that we're in these bad patterns, right, it's hard to know what it looks like to have a different pattern. How did your modeling start?
So I guess I've never even thought about it as something so unique, though, since being on Instagram, for the last couple months, people have given me a lot of that feedback. I love that you model it, and I feel like so many people maybe they give an idea but they don't make it concrete. I'm a deep thinker, but I'm also just a hardcore pragmatist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very practical. I'm actually, as much as I like thinking deeply, I also like thinking linearly. And so it would just never make sense to me to talk about some deep concept without kind of laying it out. I
Yeah.
think that probably comes into my modeling. And I'm also just, I tend not to be that embarrassed about things that I do. So on Instagram, people, when they share things I do, they always write this note on there. They're like, "Oh, sorry, I screenshotted your like super awkward face because I do get so into the modeling." But it's like, that's okay. That's part of it. And I think it does. It makes our bodies, when we watch someone do that, like, oh, they get it. They don't just get this idea like, oh, if they model their child saying this line back to them in that way, then Becky must also have a kid who like actually talks to her that way, which I do. And so I think it just normalizes things and makes it decreases our shame, which is always critical to learning.
That's very important.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I've been using it. I actually said to my teen last night, I'll decide that tomorrow, but right now what I need you to know is, and I was like, oh yeah, I got this, Dr.
Yeah.
Becky.
I love that. Yeah. I actually just put up, my stories last night were all about boundaries. And one of the things I know I'm good at, and it's just my personal life is just owning what I need and who I am. And I actually think that that doesn't mean you're cold to other people, but people feel very secure when they sense your own security. It actually makes them feel better, especially if you pair it with empathizing with their feelings, right? But that's very different than taking responsibility for their feelings or insinuating that you caused those feelings. And hearing you say, Karen, just like, I'm going to make that decision tomorrow. And right now I need you to go brush your teeth. And I'm not, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the essence of being a sturdy leader. And right now, more than ever, we all need sturdy leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we absolutely do.
So on that note, much of the work that you share with others circles back to sturdy leadership, and those 3 phrases that you suggest parents commit to memory. Would you mind telling us a bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I do think this idea of sturdy leadership has always been core to my parenting approach and to my personal therapy approach, because I think at the end of the day, as an adult, we need to become our own sturdy leaders, especially in the areas that we're still searching for other people to do that for us. And the more we do that for kids now, they internalize the ability to do that for themselves as they get older, right? So that's kind of the pathway.
For sure.
And to me, being a sturdy leader really means I am the pilot of this plane. And yes, we're going through turbulence. And yes, I hear all you back there. You're freaking out, you're screaming, you're scared. And
Sit down.
exactly. And I even get that you feel that way. But number one, I don't feel that way. Number two, your feeling that way doesn't become contagious to me. Number three, I don't need to yell at you for feeling that way. I just kind of know I'm in the cockpit making these decisions, and I can empathize but not be taken over. I think being a sturdy leader as a parent, something that parents, I think we don't talk about a lot, but I hear all the time from the adult clients in my practice, is that parents need to show kids that we're not scared of them. And really that we're not scared of their big feelings, of their protest, of their tantrum, of their rudeness. That doesn't mean giving in, but really saying, I'm still that pilot, right? If you're on a plane and there's turbulence and you hear your pilot say, does anyone else know how to do this? Or even starts yelling at you just because you're anxious. Now you're not even scared of the turbulence anymore. You're just terrified that this person's your pilot, right? And that feels so bad. So yeah, I think that's a big part of what I talk about. And I think that that links a little with those 3 phrases you referred to, in that I really do believe that when our kids are going through hard times, that parents need to use like one of 3 lines on repeat, and that's all. And they're often very different from the things we think we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And those 3 lines, and I'm sure we'll get into talking about them, are starting with, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. And then you really know you feel that way, which is often one of the odder ones. People are like, what? I don't even know what that means. That would sound. If you want to say one thing to your kid that builds confidence, one thing every day of her life, it's that line. It's, you really know you feel that way. And then the 3rd line is, tell me more, or, and then what happened, or keep going, kind of an opener.
Okay. You've obviously practiced all of these, or not even practiced, but led your household this way for so long. How do you see a change, or how do you see things different with your kids when you model these?
So that's a great question. And I guess I want to give a caveat to saying, like, just for everyone listening, like, my kids are real kids, right? And my kids, real kids are not perfect. Real kids are not compliant all the time. Real kids, when you do X, they don't output Y. And my kids definitely, all follow that kind of, they're independent people. And so I think one of the things we have to think about as parents beyond any specific strategy is just zooming out and realizing that, like, I need to judge my parenting interventions by how they feel, not quote if they work. Interesting, the difference in questions. People will be like, but that didn't work versus, what, it felt right. It just felt right. And those are really, really different.
For sure.
When people say on my Instagram, like, oh, I'm going to try that, I often write back, well, tell me how it feels to you when you do, not like tell me how it goes or tell me if it worked.
Oh, that makes sense.
So I think that's, number one. But to me, we're wiring our kids in their early years for their emotion regulation for the rest of their lives and for their expectations of relationships for the rest of their lives. I mean, whenever I say that, everyone's like, oh, that you just went there. That feels like a lot of pressure. But we are. And obviously there's other things. There's temperament. There's so many things, but that interacts with how we interact with them. And if I think about that first line, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this, or I'm so glad you came to me with this. When your younger kid says, my brother hit me, or your older kid says, I can't do this math homework, or, oh, my friends left me out of this group dinner, group Zoom, whatever it is. If the first thing we say back to them is, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this, then what you're actually doing in their bodies, what you're wiring is, when I feel uncomfortable, other people want to be close to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I feel upset, other people want to bring me in, right? That's just so powerful. I mean, that's right. Like, that's the essence of intimacy. It's the essence of resilience. And also what you're wiring beyond the relationship expectations is, then when I feel uncomfortable, one day when I'm 20, what I'm going to say to myself is, I'm so glad I'm recognizing that feeling. It's the same thing. It's like kind of, I'm so glad I'm talking to myself about this.
Yeah.
Versus, why do I feel this way? Why can't I get rid of this feeling? What do I need to get rid of it? Like, I think I'm feeling this wrong. It's the essence of mindfulness. I'm so glad I'm recognizing this. And I think about that in terms of my house with my kids. I just want my kids to forever to know that when they're in their deepest stuff, right, for lack of a better word, that they associate their mom or their dad as willing to be in it. They might not always want us to be in it. That's important too. But I don't want them to ever have a doubt of, if I want my mom to be in this with me.
Yeah, you belong. You belong to this group. We're here for you. We spoke with Dr. Sarah Baxter about suicide, and she was talking about there's a hopelessness, right? When people want to commit suicide and they don't feel like they belong. And so if you know deep, deep within inside you that you always belong and that your feelings always matter to someone, I think that must be really powerful.
Yeah. And if I, I think a lot about parts. Parts work is a big part of my therapy and, my way of thinking about kids too. And if you think about a kid who's either really conflicted about something or really hopeless and sad, that's a part of them. That's never all of them. That's a part. And one of the things our kids learn in their lives is which parts of me are attachable to my parents and which parts of me am I alone with. And whenever I say that to a parent, everyone's like, yeah, every part's attachable. I love my kid. But our kids learn in their bodies which parts of me get brought in and kind of sit on the couch with my parent, and which parts of me get sent away, either literally to my room to get punished, or they just get me a look, or they get a fixing response, which is also another way of feeling alone. And that has really massive implications going forward, because maybe the situation will change. My kid probably at age 20 won't care about a block tower falling down. But if the feeling is disappointment, well, that's going to happen his whole life, right? And if I want my kid to know, in that part is the part I want to connect to, I draw in close, I'm willing to be in that with you, that part is not alone. And I think even related to suicide, essentially what happened is there's some big part of someone that feels so much despair, but also in addition to hopelessness, feels so much aloneness. And then that part kind of takes over the command center and makes a decision for your whole body because it's so overpowering. And so going back to those words, yeah, they're really powerful. I mean, they're really powerful in a marriage too. Can you imagine, right? If you're,
Mm.
if I said to my husband, I feel like I'm doing more than my fair share. I really need more help. I feel like in addition to the kids, I do the dishwasher, whatever it is. If he looked at me and said, Becky, I'm just so glad you're talking to me about this. It's so important. I don't even know if I'd have to say anything else after that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Moving on. Right? It just feels so good. Right? And going to that next line, it's like actually when you actually say that to someone, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. It's a very deep unconscious communication to the body that, okay, we're safe here. I'm safe. It's literally saying from an attachment perspective, this part of you who is feeling all this stuff is safe with me. And then you actually feel permission in your body to share feelings, because we only can be extra vulnerable when we share the start of a story, and then we feel safe and welcome. Then we can keep going. We're kind of always testing up front. All right, is this person opening the door or are they closing the door? And then what we do next is based on, that information. And so then the next line almost flows naturally, because so many times, if my husband said that to me, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this, I probably wouldn't actually say, yeah, I'm frustrated. Or now I can like share a feeling because
Right.
it's like permission. Or my son could say, oh, my block tower fell. I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. Oh, it fell. Or oh, I'm so sad. And then that line, you really know you feel that way. To me, that first line is permission, or it's like an attachment message. The second line, you really know you feel that way. The reasons I think is the essence of self-confidence building is, I think about confidence as our ability to feel sure that we really are feeling what we're feeling. I think confidence has nothing to do with feeling good. It has nothing to do with really feeling proud. It's just the ability to say in our bodies, yeah, I'm recognizing a feeling, and I'm a good feeler of my feeling. I don't have a ton of self-doubt. It's like I feel like confidence is like a confidence interval from statistics, which is the degree of certainty you have in the truth of your results. I feel like that's what's happening. It's like, this is the degree of certainty I have in the truth of my
Mm.
feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one thing I see in my private practice with adults is the opposite of that message. The number one thing people struggle with, and of course they never come in saying this, but the pattern of it is, I don't think I'm a good feeler of my feelings. Like, I feel like I feel something, and then I doubt myself, then I blame myself, then I wonder, would other people feel this way? If they were in my shoes, would they? It's like this whole complicated system versus the simplicity of, yeah, I am mad. I mean, that doesn't give myself permission to go scream at someone's face, but I know I'm mad. I'm very certain
Mm-hmm.
that I feel that way. And to give our kids the gift of that, especially when their feelings conflict with something that's convenient for us. It's totally inconvenient to have a kid melting down about ice cream for breakfast or being rude. It's very inconvenient. But when we say to our kid, when they're older, whatever it is, get sleepovers now. All my friends stay up later. All my friends get more video games. Like, wow, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. You sound mad. Yeah, I am mad. You really know you feel mad. Mom, does that mean I can? No, we're not even talking about what we're doing yet. But I'm just pausing because I just recognizing that you're mad, which lets me know this is something you care about. And you really know you care about this difference in video game time. And I'm just recognizing that that's really, really true and valid.
Mm-hmm.
It's confidence building down the line for your kid. It's also very connecting to your kid in the moment because they feel seen.
Yeah, because it's so easy to be like, stop screaming at me right now. And then that just takes away all of the validation, right?
And I think you could do both, because like, I'm not a pushover. I think you say, I need you to stop screaming, but I need you to stop screaming at me because I actually think you're trying to communicate a really important message. And I'm just letting you know, as long as you're screaming at me, I actually can't process the words you're trying to communicate because I'm overwhelmed by your tone. So I actually want to hear what you're talking about, but maybe our bodies just need some time to take some deep breaths so we can actually hear each other. Right. I think that's what I would say to my kid.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, what I think the other thing we do a lot as parents is we think logic is going to help. Well, here's the study about the video games, or actually, you forgot your friend Alex. Alex gets less video game time. I know. I talked to his mom, or right. Like, and I think one of the things that's important is difficult moments are almost always come from a failure of regulation, not a failure of logic, ever. It's rarely logic. That's the thing that we need.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anyone say, actually, when I explained this to my kid about video game time and attention, he actually stopped bringing it up to me. It worked wonderfully. I've
Yeah.
never heard that.
Next time he got mad, he thought to himself, well, Alex doesn't have any.
Exactly. Right? Like if those families are listening to your podcast, I would love to be proven wrong to know that special group of kids who work for and study them, because I know that doesn't make me feel good. If I was left out of a group dinner and my husband was like, well, actually, it's because of this and this, I would be like, oh, I feel better. We struggle because of how we feel. Logic and feelings, just they're different. They're both important. They're just different languages, right? And so what we're really looking for when we're feeling is someone to understand our feelings. Our feelings are looking for support and understanding, not for solutions, ever. And I think these lines and our ability to empathize with our kids and hear their feelings versus solve a feeling that can't be solved anyway, that makes all the difference in getting through the tween teenage years.
I love that you just said that. It's like you can't solve a feeling.
Yeah, it's just not. I sometimes imagine, I'm a visual person too. I like imagine feelings in our bodies being personified, and they're just screaming like, you guys have us all wrong. Like, we're not trying to be solved. We don't need to even go away. We're not that bad. We just want to be understood. Like, we just want to just someone understand us, and then we'll simmer down. And to me, that adds, I picture that sometimes when my kids are really upset, and like that helps me kind of find the humor and take a deep breath and be like, right. Feelings are for feeling. And they're precisely giving someone a hard time because they feel so big and so overwhelming. And what makes things feel less big and overwhelming is when someone is in it with us. That's all, just in it, not pulling us out of it, just in it.
That helps a lot, because I'm sure a lot of people are kind of struggling with that exact, like maybe even with themselves. Like when you try to logic yourself.
You do, right? Exactly, right? That's what we do so many times with anxiety. Is you try to solve it versus tolerate it and kind of have compassion for ourselves, which is a way of creating an internal relationship, just like the one we're trying to do with our kids.
Also difficult.
Yeah. Quick question, Becky. Is it too late? Is it ever too late to start these practices?
I love that question, and I get it all the time on Instagram. And I actually have this like long post called "It's Not Too Late."
And the answer is yes.
Yeah, no, not too late, for a million reasons. Number one, repair is often more powerful than getting it right the first time. And I think as parents, we really need to remind ourselves that same thing. You go back to someone and you say, hey, this thing happened. Maybe like I'm taking responsibility, different from blame, just I yelled or I did this thing. And I've been thinking about it. And I wish I had done this instead, or going forward, I want to do it this way instead. And what that does for a child is when you refer back to a moment that happened and felt bad, you're reopening up that feeling in their body. And parents are like, oh, isn't that bad? Why do I want to go back there? No, you need to go back to the feel bad moments, because when you go back, you have the chance to layer on something that feels good. Now you take a moment that felt bad and alone to your kid, and you can layer on understanding and connection and repair. And if again we think about what we're wiring our kids for, I hope my kids one day go into friendships, partnerships, definitely a marriage, saying when things feel bad, my body knows to expect some moment of increased understanding. My goal is to understand and reflect and figure out a way to reconnect. That's not the end of the story, the feel bad moment. It's the point that you need to pause, and then it doesn't have to be feel good, but you figure something out. We actually don't wire our kids for that expectation unless you've gotten it wrong. Like you have to get it wrong to repair. You don't repair a moment that felt good.
Very
and that's
true.
also awful for your kids. Can you imagine your kid getting to a marriage having been wired for 100% attunement? That's like a sure bet way to feel awful about like any other adult in your life. So repair is where it's at. Repair is really where it's at. And I ask parents, to really consider that. And if you have a problem with that, I struggle and I feel shame about it. What I think parents really have to start with is to think, I really actually need to repair internally first. I need to find that part of myself that can why did I do that? Forget sharing it with my kid. How can I find the idea that I'm still a good person? I'm a good parent who yelled at my kid. How can I repair internally in my own body? I must be filled with such shame. And then I can go and give that type of repair to my child.
It reminds me of like mistakes are our best teachers. So that kind of really fits in really well with that too.
I know that a lot of tough conversations that need to come up between parents and teens, like you were saying, it's so hard to just get started and get the ball rolling and start a conversation in a way that it's going to be a successful conversation. So I'd kind of like to know if you had any ideas about how parents and teens might start a conversation that would be tough to start.
Great. And I think this leads naturally to that kind of third line also that we didn't talk about, which is that like just tell me more line. Because I think the key to talking to older kids and honestly to younger kids is we have to be more invested in learning what's going on for them than teaching or guiding. You have to be. And I think this is hard when our kids are teens because we feel like the stakes are higher. But just like logic never works to make someone feel better, I don't know any teen who ends up making a good decision over the course of their life because of a lecture from a parent. Like I just don't know a party who's like, well, I can imagine my mom saying this is a bad choice, and as a result, I'm going to make a good one. It just right, it just doesn't happen, or it happens for a little while, and then those kids get older and they've never learned how to think for themselves, and they eventually get to an age where they know there's no consequences from their parents, or and they haven't learned how to think through decisions, whether that looks to them bad decisions or it looks like a ton of just immense anxiety because of lack of practice. Either outcome's not great. And so the first thing I'll say is with your older child, you really have to consider first, where am I in the history of this child's life at having successful, messy conversations, right? Families come to me in my practice. They're like, my kid is 14. They're breaking curfew back when, kids were, it wasn't coronavirus, right? And if you're just trying to form deeper connections for your kids and build trust at age 14, in no way am I going to say that's not possible. Of course it is, right? It goes back to when your kids are young, when they hit their younger sister, when they cheated at their first board game, when they said that they hated you, things that I consider messy moments. And if those moments were eventually, even in a repair moment, coupled with kind of understanding and curiosity versus punishment and judgment, you're going to be at a very different place when your kid is 14 from how willing they are to trust you to be a safe person in their messy moments. I think about that a lot. We're wiring kids for messy moments. Do they associate their parents being in a messy moment, helping them be curious and think through it? Or have they been wired to think messy moments tend to lead to me getting in trouble and being alone? And probably I just need to protect myself from sharing those messy moments with my parents more than anything else. Now, again, does that mean you're destined to have your kid not talk to you? No, but do you need to have a series of conversations? Going back to that repair, saying, we thought about things even when you were a lot younger. Remember, I'm sure you do too, this time when you were 8 and this thing happened and you got this series of punishments. This might sound crazy, but I bet those things even lead to you being closed off with us today because you're not sure if we can hear these things and just sit with you about it and talk through it and even see your perspective. And you probably expect us to kind of, yes, stay calm for a little bit, but then eventually give you punishment and kind of leave you feeling bad. I get that that's probably happening for you, which is why you're not so open with us. If you want to say one thing to your 14-year-old that's going to make her more open, it's going to be that, not, hey, come on, talk to us. Like, we won't judge. Like, we know some of your friends talk to their parents, talk to us too. Our bodies always remember. Our bodies don't lie. And if your body remembers aloneness or bad feelings or shame, it's going to protect you from that beyond the logic of it. We have to speak to that. And I think second is even just as a set of skills, saying my goal is to ask more questions and say more leading sentences than anything else. So words like, tell me more about that. I'm curious to hear more. Okay, and then what? Okay, what do you think about that? How did you feel when that happened? Often in tricky situations, we have a conflict. A part of us feels this and wants this, and a different part of us feels this and wants this. And it's so hard to figure out what to do. Tell me about that in the situation, right? And you have to honor the part of your child that wants to do the bad thing. You have to. Okay, so you broke curfew. Okay, so you were on your iPad later than we talked about. Let's talk about the part that wants to do that.
Hmm.
Oh no, mom, I won't do it again. Yeah, honey, I don't think that's helpful to say that, because I think you will want to do it again. And I'm not saying that to catch you, but because obviously if you did it, it feels really important to house party or FaceTime with your friends when they're all allowed to do it. And I actually think it's just important for us to honor that and get to know that, because if we don't, I think we're leaving out an important part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important. So often I hear from parents, they're like, I talk to my kids about not being their iPad at night. I talk to them about sharing. I talk to my kids, we're not going to hit when we go to the play date. And I always say kindly, I'm like, we need to do the opposite. You want to talk to your kids about the urge to hit. You want to talk about your kids about how hard it is to share. And you want to talk to your kids about the urge to be on their iPad even when they're not allowed. That's what you want to talk to your kids about, so they're not alone with that part.
You're going to want to hit Kelsey. And frankly, I want to hit her sometimes, but
Kind of, right? Like, yeah, sharing is so hard. And one of the things that happens when you share with other kids is you get frustrated. That's so normal. And sometimes when you get frustrated, you have all that energy in your hand, and it wants to get rid of that frustration by hitting. It feels like it can. Oh, but then this happens, then this happens. That's a bummer. Let's practice together. And same thing. Okay, so what can we do when you want to be on that iPad late at night? If I'm telling you that's really one of the rules I'm not going to be flexible about. Let's think about that together. Let's come, right? That's where you want to get in. So often we end up shutting down and making our child more alone with the very thing they're actually looking for our help with. And then we wonder why the behavior continues. It's
Mm-hmm.
because behavior, and difficult behavior, is almost always a result of a feeling that felt too big to manage, or an urge that felt too big to keep in your body. And the only thing that stops that from converting into behavior is actually having someone else help us with it and be in it with us. Right. So that's really, really important, I think, especially for parents of teens, to kind of reframe their understanding of why kids are doing the things they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too about how the best way for your kid to open up, or one of the best ways, is to set that foundation for many years where they feel comfortable that you can kind of revert back to, so they always know that they can come to you. But also, again, that it's not too late, that you can do that repair work. I think a lot of people who are listening right now maybe haven't been setting that foundation.
And I think just another concrete skill to give parents around this, and this is really helpful in a marriage, is if you know you get activated and you're thinking, I'm going to go talk to my teen about this thing that she's doing or he's doing, and I want to stay calm, but I just know myself. Like I tried that last time and I ended up yelling or saying something I regretted. Go into the conversation with a pad and a pen and tell your child, I want you to talk really slowly, because all I'm going to be doing when you're talking is writing down everything you're saying. This is going to feel weird, but I'm going to write everything down, and then I'm going to take 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you about it and ask more questions. And the reason I'm doing that is because if my body has another task to pay attention to what you're saying, it's probably going to pause its kind of reactive circuit. And I want to be less reactive, but just like things are hard for you, this is really, really hard for me. It is really hard. And sweetie, that doesn't even have to do with you. The more I think about it, it probably has to do with how little tolerance my own parents had for me for some of my messy moments.
it's really about grandma.
Yeah, literally. Sorry, it's your grandma's fault.
Right. How would you suggest that maybe a young person come to their parent about something that's difficult to talk about?
So, look, this is really tricky. And I would give young people two maybe conflicting pieces of advice. Is that I have some ideas for how you can go and lower parents' defenses and maybe really invite them to participate in the type of conversation that you want them to participate in. Also, and I would give this advice to anyone, it's just hard when you're a kid to say, it's never our job or our responsibility to change people. And some kids really do. They have parents with a lot of limitations. And I think on that side of the equation, something I'd say to teens listening is, it is not your fault if your parents can't hear your underlying feelings and needs as valid. And kind of your goal in your teenage years is to kind of survive those years and try to hold on to a voice inside you that says, my feelings and urges and needs are real, and they're good, and there will be people in this world who can see beneath my behaviors, into those feelings and needs. And it's so hard to hold on to that because we tend to generalize about the world based on our family.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, to try to say to your parents, hey, I want to talk to you about something tricky. And before launching into the conversation, I want to let you know something I've learned, that I feel like this conversation can go one of two ways. Either you can try to convince me of something, and you might even be right, or you're going to tell me why I'm doing the wrong thing, or you're going to tell me what's obvious. And I'm just telling you, even if you're right, I'm probably just going to shut down. And I'm just going to end up feeling really alone. And you can use this line. You can say, one of the things I heard on this podcast, and this is kind of, I'm stealing this line a little bit from Esther Perel, who's a master of couples therapy, she says you can be right or you can be married. I kind of think the same thing is true. You can be right or you can be connected. And I would say, and I really think me and you, and I think you'd agree, we need to be more connected through this. And that is going to require you to listen to what I'm saying without needing to be right, but just to, and I will share a lot more with you if you ask me more questions than you tell me guidance. And if you see the things I'm saying as different from what you think, but valid. And I need to hear that from you to feel like it's safe to talk through things. So I know that's a long preamble, but kind of like anything else, I think we kind of have to agree on the guidelines to talking before we launch into, it's like kind of our contract.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I need from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe there could be an opportunity before something tricky comes up for you to tell your parents that, so that when it does happen and you're in your emotions, you're not forgetting this little line, and then they can be like, oh, I remember you said this. Let's, keep that in mind.
I think that's brilliant. And I think that's always when we can intervene successfully, is when our bodies are calm, right? So I think that's great. Hey, I actually have nothing to talk to you about specifically, but I know going into this year, there'll be things that come up. And even to say, listen to this podcast I listened to, or go to the psychologist's website. She even has this printable words and name as my handle on Instagram that are the 3 lines parents need for their kids. I can't even tell you how many parents tell me, they're like, that is on my closet every morning when I get dressed. I remind myself, it's just like a helpful reminder. Those are my lines. I'm going to try to say a couple of them today.
Well, Dr. Becky, that's actually brilliant. This week, we asked our listeners for some scenarios where they're having conflict with their teens, and we were hoping that maybe you'd go over a few with us and maybe give us a couple ideas before we wrap up.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. So our first question is, I'm having a hard time with technology time. No matter how many boundaries I set, he finds a loophole or argues. He swears that we're the only parents that set limits or shuts things down at night. How do we stay strong and confident about our boundaries and leadership?
So 2 things. I think that number 1, team meetings are a very underused parenting strategy, especially as your kids get older. And I actually think older meaning starting at like age 3. So if you're thinking my kid's older than 3, which probably your listeners are, that's so important. If you think about yourself in a job, and if your boss came and they're like, oh, actually, here are the rules for how often, I don't know, you can leave the office for lunch, or here's when you have to be in and out. And it's kind of, this is what we're doing. You just feel done to. Nobody likes to feel done to. Kids, adults, nobody. Now, if your boss said, hey, let's have a meeting, there are definitely going to be some changes in rules coming down the pipe about going out to lunch and starting and end times, but there maybe is a little flexibility on some of that. Either way, let's brainstorm together and see what we can come up with. The feeling in your body is just totally different because you feel involved, especially if during the meeting, boss is writing down all your ideas, right? So this is so important with technology. You know what? We've been arguing nonstop about the iPad. I'm not happy, you're not happy. And here's the thing. I think we both want to feel better about it, or at least get along better. Let's do what I do in my office. Let's do what I learned growing up. Let's have a meeting. And we're both going to come in with some amount of flexibility. I'm not going to lie, this is not a meeting for you to decide all this. This is just one of those things parents have a big decision-making power about. But I am willing to hear you out and see if I can be flexible here and there. Let's have a meeting. And then you brainstorm a ton of ideas and write them down and review one by one and see what you can come up with. And it is important to be flexible. Now, maybe there's 1 day a week where you give them more, right? Where maybe, there's ways to kind of brainstorm around this to give your kid a little bit more buy-in. That's one. But the second part of it, I think, is critical. And I up on my stories, all of this, I'm going to put it in my highlights, a million things. How do I get better about saying no about blank topic? And it really does have to do with both projecting our decision-making ability, but also, interestingly enough, empathizing with someone else. Empathizing with someone else creates the distance we need to hold our own boundaries, which sounds odd. Well, trying to convince someone else of your boundary actually enmeshes you. You're trying to bring them over. You don't need to bring them over. And actually, in empathy, you're able to say, I'm making my decision, kind of here I am over here. And then even if everyone listens, like putting your hand out, be like, oh, you over there. You're having that feeling. You're over there. And I'm over here. Where when we're convincing, well, this is why you're trying to bring someone over to your side. That's the essence of having no boundaries if you're trying to bring them over. So I think to your kid owning this and saying after the team meeting, let's say there's still pushback, look, Alex, this is the decision. We've talked about this, but moreover, I'm your parent, and part of my job as your parent is to make decisions that I think are good for you, even when you don't like them. So this is what's happening. I'm doing the decision making. You're doing the not liking it. We're actually both doing our jobs. It just happens to be a little unpleasant. And then I think owning your kid, you can be upset about it. You can be mad at me. You can be upset the whole night. Only you know how you feel and how long your body needs to feel that way. I can take it. I'm not scared of you. And not only that, I still love you when you're mad at me, and I know we'll get through this. And so there's a real connectivity there, but there's also a real firmness there. Setting a boundary doesn't have to be mean. It actually is best when you set both a firm boundary, owning your role, and empathize. You can even add to that. I would feel annoyed too. Oh, Mom, does that mean you're changing it? No. And I would say this, those two things are totally different. I'm making the decision. I also understand why you're mad at me. I'm just holding those both as equally true. Your kid can still protest. The effectiveness of our decisions cannot be judged by our kids' feelings. Those are our kids' feelings. Like, that has nothing to do with us. They're an independent person. So I think that's a really helpful model.
Amazing. Thank you.
I love that. It goes back into that sturdy leadership. So we have another question that's a little involved, and this is about an adult-child relationship with their parent. The child feels, because life isn't always going well for him, that the parents are judging him. And when he feels that way, he seems to ghost them. So he just kind of disappears. And he also feels like he's letting them down. They try to tell him that they love him no matter what, that they are his safe place, but he still struggles with that relationship and that connection. Do you have any advice on how to help him without smothering him, or how they might be able to give him space without it hurting?
Yeah, well, look, if this person was in my private practice, what I would probably say is, I think there's a lot going on. But one of the things that strikes me is you're not really sure what you need when you're feeling that way. And figuring out what we need and what we want is really tricky and is also the first step in having healthy relationships. We often know what we don't like and what we don't need. That's a reaction to someone else's behavior, right? Oh, I don't like when you say that to me, or I don't like when you don't help out with kids' bedtime. That's actually very different than saying, well, what do I want and what do I need? And can I state that? And that goes kind of back to being a sturdy leader of your own life. But even saying some version of that to your parent, which is starting with a story, when I'm having a tough time, I tend to ghost you. I tend to ignore you. And the reason I'm doing that is because I feel really bad myself. And I know I don't want some solution or something that feels smothering. But actually, to be honest, it's really hard for me to know what I do need and what would feel good. And maybe it's just the start of a conversation between us now, just saying that. And I don't want you to offer me 5 things that I could need. Only I'm going to figure that out. But I kind of want you to say, oh, well, I'm so glad you're talking to me about that. You really know you want something and aren't sure what it is. Maybe send those 3 lines to your parents. Tell me more about that. And if you have nothing else to say, that's fine. I can just sit here in silence with you and tell you I love you, or I can, say we'll figure it out, or we can get off the phone, but at least this is the start of something. I have the chills as I say that. I cry. I feel like that would probably feel really nice.
Absolutely. I know something else too that we're all struggling with, particularly at the moment, is also the difficult world situation. And so a question we got is, how might we chat with our kids about difficult world situations? How can we as parents stay strong and exhibit strength during uncertain times?
Great. So I think this goes back to that second line and that confidence, where to be a sturdy leader for your kid, even making these decisions we have to make. So many parents are like, how do I tell my kid I've made the decision to go to school or virtual school, but I don't know if it was the right decision. How do I become a sturdy leader in that? And I think right? The key thing is own what you know. Don't lie about it. And that is very sturdy. So, as an example there, and then I'll talk about the more general world situation, just saying, look, I've made the decision that you're, let's say, going back to school. And to be totally honest, some of your friends are doing virtual learning, some of them are going. And I'm the person in this family who makes tricky decisions. Do I know it's right for sure? Nope. Is that the loudest voice in me? Yes. And I know I always am learning to trust our loudest voice. You're going to go back to school or you're going to do virtual school. Might we look back on this in a year and say, ooh, kind of wish I did the other? We might. And you know what I know? We're going to figure it out from there and we'll be fine. So there's so much sturdiness in there, but you're also not lying and pretending something is true when it's not. And I think the number one thing parents can own when they talk to kids about what's happening in the world is that our sturdiness is separate from knowing all the answers, right? I mean, I talk a big game, but this is like the hardest thing for me right now. I mean, I sound really sturdy and I've always had sturdiness in my own family. It's very easy to have sturdiness when you're talking to strangers. I think I've long equated knowing and feeling good about something with sturdiness. And that's, there's no way anyone feels sturdy right now as a result of feeling like they know. The feeling of knowing the right thing seems to be absent from every level of the world. Like nobody, right? So even just like going back to that confidence idea, I know what I know. And to say to your kids about the world, there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot that nobody has the answers to. And look, that's actually just one of the hardest things in life is just to not know and to wait. And what I do know is that I'll listen to your worries. What I do know is that our family unit is the source of stability more than going to school or living here, seeing your friends or going to soccer. That stuff all stinks that we can't do it. But you know what doesn't change? The fact that it's me, you, and your mom and your brother. And that's like always going to be our unit. And I know that, and I know we'll get through it. And I know we'll have tough times, and I know we'll still laugh, and I know we'll still have dance parties, and I know we'll cry, and I know we'll end up on the other side. You know, if we wire our kids to say there are times we don't know things and there's times we don't feel certain, but my body remembers a kind of a rallying around that and a togetherness, I think we're doing probably a pretty solid job.
Yeah. Well, and I think parents, or I imagine parents, would have a difficult time having those tough conversations about scary world situations with a kid at any age. And I just wondered quickly if you had younger children too, if it's appropriate to have conversations about the dangers in the world as long as you do it with empathy and reminding them that they have a strong unit behind them and that maybe you don't have all the answers, and that we can revisit it when you're a bit older too, or when we have a better understanding.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. That to me is actually key. I actually think some of the younger kids and families, the toddlers, are really struggling and having massive tantrums right now because number one, that's developmentally appropriate, but also because parents aren't talking to them. And if you're a parent listening to this and you have young kids, what I would leave you with as an idea is it's not information that scares kids. It's when kids notice changes in their environment and then don't have an adult give them information and give them a story to understand those changes. That is terrifying. It's literally being in the dark, right? We know that as an adult. We're like, oh, I felt in the dark about that. You didn't tell me. And being in the dark for a kid, being alone in the dark is literally terrifying. And emotionally leaving them alone in the dark leaves them having to be in a constant state of hypervigilance for threat because nobody's saying to them, I'm here with you. This is why we're not seeing grandma. This is why we're wearing masks. This is why I'm telling you it's safe to go back to preschool again. This is why daddy and mommy are working from home. This is why daddy and mommy are arguing more. Here's a story to understand. And when we give kids a story to understand their scared feelings, going back to that idea about feelings are looking for support and understanding. When we give them a story, their bodies say, oh, I'm not crazy. That thing I noticed is real, but also it's not this big bad wolf. I understand it now. Now my body can operate with an assumption of safety instead of an assumption of threat. And in general, kids and adults, we act how we feel. And if your kid is out of control, you need to assume at any age they're feeling out of control. And the best thing to get kids back control is actually not logic, but it's connection and understanding and exploring what's happening for them.
Too good. Too good. This is such good stuff, Dr. Becky. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up for you because I know your kids are going to be peeking out in a second, but we did want to ask if there's anything that fills your cup. You're constantly pouring into other people. What do you do that inspires you or fills your cup? Is there anything that you're listening to or reading right now?
I think the thing that fills my cup is disconnecting from my phone and just being really silly and laughing and ridiculous with my kids. Like we do this thing called talent show where, and my babysitter actually made this up where we sit around the table and we call someone up one by one. So they'd be like, Becky Kennedy to the stage. And then we do a series of like, to the stage is just the floor. And we do like a ridiculous dance or movement or something just like totally insane and like bizarre, but moving our bodies. And then we kind of bow and get a round of applause. And in a world of seriousness, this feels really important. So I think that's number one.
I love it.
And I think kids seeing their parents be really silly and willing to like make a fool out of themselves, but then actually get greeted with kind of like laughter and clapping is really powerful. And then I think I talk to my friends, and it's really important for me these days. And I've said some of this on Instagram, just to remember that at my core, or like my control center is led by Becky, and Dr. Becky is a part of me, but she's definitely not all of me. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of refer to, I don't always feel great about things. I definitely make parenting mistakes. I feel really anxious. I feel worried. I feel like I definitely don't have it all together, and allowing that part to get airtime, both to people who follow me, definitely to my friends, definitely to my husband, is really important in kind of staying balanced.
Yeah, you have to be strong for your kids, strong for your patients. That's a lot of strength. It's probably nice to be able to just feel sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you be able to share with us Instagram and your platforms and anything you have going on where people can find your resources? And we'll link it in the show notes as well.
Great. So yeah, my Instagram handle is Dr. Becky at Home, DrBeckyAthome. And it's funny, I came up with that name. I launched just before the pandemic, but the people I work with in terms of parenting work, they always joke after a time. They're like, I feel like you're in my home. Like I have Dr. Becky at home with me. Like I can imagine what you say. But now I'm like, literally Dr. Becky at home. And so it's
yeah.
And that's the same name as my blog, where I kind of have longer form articles about some of the ideas that I write about on Instagram. My Instagram is very dense. Like, it has, for better or for worse, I feel like you have to own who you are when you're an adult. It's definitely not like a quick like and scroll. It's definitely like, there's like thought-provoking material. There's a lot of content there. And there's also a ton of videos there. I do a ton of IGTVs, and like Karen referred to, I really model things and get into things. And through my profile on my Instagram, in my link tree there are links to longer form, more comprehensive ways of thinking about things. I kind of have a foundational course called Managing Meltdowns and Building Emotion Regulation. I have a course called Parenting Tweens and Teens, which takes all of the ideas of that first course, but applies it to older kids. And then I have a course about preparing your older kids for the arrival of a new baby, which I think is a massive transition that we don't give nearly enough attention to. And I also have done a bunch of workshops, and will continue to be doing more that I'll record and put there. So there's a workshop on the school transition this year. There's a workshop on deeply feeling kids, which are kids who hate talking about their feelings, but have big feelings and really don't calm down easily. That's my most popular one. And there'll be a bunch of others up by the time this is released, because I'm doing a series of them. And then I would say anyone who finds these ideas interesting, come to my Instagram, send me a DM, tell me what's interesting, tell me what's confusing, tell me what you disagree with. Like I said, I find people and family systems endlessly kind of interesting. So hearing more from people of different perspectives really gets my kind of brain and body going. And I really value that. So hope to hear from some of your listeners.
Amazing.
I'm so glad you said that too.
Yeah, so this has been so lovely. We're so thankful that you were able to sit down with us and answer all of those questions. We packed so much into this episode. I think people are going to be really thrilled.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really nice to connect with you all.
Yeah, amazing meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Health That's Personal. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts for bonus episodes and new releases every Wednesday. The Health That's Personal podcast is produced by me, McKenna and hosted with the Phronesis Health Initiative team, Karen Shively and Sean Tingle. Special thanks to portrait artist Alexander, musical contributor Bernie Ramke, and to our guests and experts for their kindness and bravery in sharing their stories each week.
Please listen, subscribe, engage, and send us topics we can explore that would help you on your journey.
Because health, it's personal.